Hello, and welcome back once again to Behind the Bench with Neil Francis. I am joined, as always, by Mr. Neil Francis.
Hi, guys.
By Mr. John Donovan.
So you're actually going to him first, because you usually go to me first, but now...
That's why you threw me off.
I did this right, yeah. So not only do you get the title, you get... I'm good, guys. Good to see you.
And I'm some other chap.
You're the creator. It's your show, man.
No, that was my review from Simsy.
Oh, was it?
Yeah,
oh.
he said it's a very good podcast, John Donovan, Neil Francis, and some other chap doing it.
It's his show, so, Simsy. It's Gareth Hewish.
There you go. No, I'll take the billing. I just know how you feel now, not being on the marquee, so I kind of feel like we've bonded over that, and we can, it's now us two against Franny.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, but I am Gareth Hewish, and welcome back once again, and thank you ever so much for the feedback from the pre-season episodes. Probably, I would say, our most humorous episode so far.
I got a lot off my chest.
I just remember Steve-O and Tyler Mosienko. There was
Steve-O, Tyler Mosienko. What else did we have? We had a small hostel.
Yeah,
we're hosting players in all sorts of absolute nonsense, but just goes to show, it's always worth buying a ticket. Yeah. Guys, all the feedback that you had for those couple of pre-season episodes, anyone joining in with a couple of extra stories, or just everyone just having a good laugh as we had over it?
A couple of people came up to me in Graz, and we're talking about stuff that they wanted to be brought up. Ricky Maloney was one. Shout out to Ricky.
Yeah.
Who then tweeted about it, but I'd forgotten what he'd asked, what the point that he'd made, so I had to ask him to give me a hint. So I think I know what it is, but I'll make sure I'll clarify that with Ricky, because Graz was a long few days. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah.
I think.
How were the scooter rides?
Scooter ride, fantastic.
Yeah.
Thoroughly recommend it. Cobblestones, not so good.
Did you tell Todd you had a concussion when you came on?
Yeah. True story, yeah. It felt like a concussion. Yeah. Which is maybe why I can remember what
exactly.
Ricky
obviously.
Not the alcohol.
No.
Yeah, no other circumstances.
Nothing to do with Czech beer, Austrian beer.
And you being out with Chrissy Aglin.
And a visit to Arnold Schwarzenegger's house as well.
Did you?
Yeah.
Really? Was he in?
He wasn't, but there was several life-size statues of him in there. Well worth a visit if you're in the Graz area.
There's 3 of them here today around this table.
In terms of European weekends, you've been in plenty as a player. This last weekend as a Devils staff member, what did it rack up? No teetotalers being forced back into the demons.
They're always good, because from the year I was in, the massive thing about going across to Europe was you knew you were going to have a good party before, during and after, where now obviously for the guys, they had a couple of beers after the Graz game, well deserved. But for me now, as somebody that's going to watch the game, we had a great time. It was fantastic, and an unbelievable job by the fans, particularly in that Graz game behind the goal. Me and Chris Aglin went down there for the 3rd period and joined in. The owners were down there for 3 periods, just absolutely loving it. And, hats off to Geraint.
Absolutely.
He led the charge,
and also teaching Stephen Dixon how to wave a flag, which I thought was nice.
Yeah. And I also love with the Mariamaki chants.
Yeah.
You can see how intense G is, when he's pointing in his face, you better listen to this chant, it's about you. But some very good clips on YouTube.
G, I mean that with love, by the way. If you're listening, you're a good lad. So.
Absolutely.
He's all right.
And so we went to the polls, and we asked what season review you'd like us to do.
Was this a binding poll? Was it?
It was. It was.
You can't go back and vote on it again.
No, definitely not. That's not the way these things work.
Simsy will love that joke. Simsy will love that joke.
And it was neck and neck between the first Superleague year and the first year of the tent, right up until the very last day. And then by 2%, the first Superleague year won out. I was very worried that we were going to have to do a marathon 5-hour show covering two very different seasons 10 years apart. But thankfully,
yes,
that wasn't the case, because as we well know, gentlemen, even one episode takes far longer than we ever envisaged to get done. So it is the first Super League year, and we're going to delve right into it right now. And John, I'm going to come to you first to explain exactly what happened to the Heineken League, why did it go away, and where did this Super League come from?
I think there was a year gap, but Heineken finished 92, 93, or was it 93, 94? No, 92, 93, and there were a couple of years then after there, 93, 94, 94, 95, which was just the British Ice Hockey League. But I think what had happened is you started to have the arrival of the arena teams, and Franny will know a bit more about the ins and outs, so he can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think everybody thought the landscape was moving towards a Sheffield or a Manchester, 8,000, 17,000 respectively. So I think there was a feeling that ice hockey could go to the next step. And I initially remember, and this is going back to, South Wales Echo cuttings from back then, that there was a fear that Cardiff wouldn't get in, because initially the talk was you had to have at least a minimum of a 5,000 seater arena to get in, and of course the Wales National Ice Rink wasn't that. And then I think it was clarified that you had to have a plan to have a 5,000 seater arena within 3 years or 5 years, and we did, and clearly, we stuck to that time frame. That building went up. I remember there was all sorts of proposals. There was proposals about going to the Millennium Stadium and having a pitch that could be taken out on slabs and an ice rink put in. It was all kinds of crazy stuff. But
sorry, did you say within 3 years or within 3 decades?
Well, it became 3 decades. A little bit, yeah. We had about 6 prime ministers and different things. But it was exciting, and I think obviously hindsight's a wonderful thing, and we all know what happened to Super League. But at the time, we probably all thought that British ice hockey could go to that next step, because there was interest from Sky, and we did have these arenas coming in, and Sheffield were getting big crowds, and Manchester were getting big crowds even in Division 1. We talked about that before. I remember them getting sort of 12,000 against Chelmsford when it was sort of the Division 1 decider, which Sky covered. So I think we all thought at the time, and again I say hindsight's a wonderful thing, that hockey could go to that next level, and it was a really, really exciting time.
So a big driver behind it, from what I can remember, it was Newcastle and Sir John Hall.
Yes.
So he was obviously the owner of Newcastle United, and he was forming this sporting club. So like a lot of the big European guns they got a sporting club. So he bought the Newcastle basketball team and the ice hockey team. I think they played that 1 year before the Super League out of the Crowtree Centre in Sunderland. And then they moved.
Just a shout out, who was the coach that year?
Rick Brabant.
Oh,
we mentioned it. We got it in. Yes. Yeah. So that's ticked off the list. Rick Brabant.
Yeah. Anyone playing behind the bench bingo?
Yeah.
There we go.
We need a joke about JD about his wife. You need one of those in there, and then you've got a house. Yeah. Anyway, so it was Sir John Hall who was driving it in terms of he wanted this Newcastle Sporting Club, the basketball team. He bought the ice hockey team. Maybe that's where the whole arena thing came from, because they were then going to move into the Metro
Telly West, whatever
arena it was up in Newcastle. And it was around about that time that Sky had, like you said, Sky were interested, and they just started pumping massive money into football, and they were looking to take on other sports. And I think the plan was that Sky were going to come in with some mega money that would, revolutionise the game. And like you say, if you weren't in an arena by then why would you be party to this this Sky money that all the football teams are starting to benefit from, and there's going to be a massive windfall. So there's definitely huge plans on the horizon.
Because the founding members of the Super League were
Yes.
who were playing out of the Centrum, which is only around 3,000, I believe.
It was a new facility, similar to ours. It had taken 3 decades to build, and it only took 3 years to knock down. I think it's now a Tesco, and
again they had a big sort of backer, didn't they?
Yeah, it was bar. Bar construction. And
is that the same person as Bar's Iron Brew, made in Scotland from Gutters?
Let's just say yes.
Good question. Twitter is bar construction the same people who make Iron Brew?
Yeah.
That's my brother. He's on his way up there.
There we go. Can I do this as a quick quiz, see if I can remember, because it was 8 teams, wasn't it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So you got A. That one's for free.
Ayr, Basingstoke, Bracknell, Cardiff, Nottingham, Manchester, Sheffield. How many's there? 7. What's the other one?
I've just talked about one. You weren't listening to me.
Was I talking about Newcastle? Sorry.
Are they on the list?
Yeah, Newcastle on the list. So those were the initial 8, I think.
They were the Cobras at the time.
They were the Newcastle Cobras.
As they came into the league.
Yes.
And the one that sticks out for me there, and I don't mean any disrespect or anything when I say this, but who were the backers of Basingstoke at the time taking on this?
I'm trying to think. Peter Woods was coach.
They had Weller as their sponsor.
They had Weller.
So
they did.
They had a decent sponsorship. Because I think is Weller like the only company that operates out of Basingstoke or something. So they're a big deal in Basingstoke. and they chuck their money into the local community. So they actually had one of the better sponsorships in the league.
And that's why if you're driving around Basingstoke, everyone's got such lovely hair.
Yeah. Everyone has got lovely hair.
And the players on that team had lovely hair.
They did. Apart from Richard Little, who was bald, I think.
Yeah, but what a shiny scalp.
It was lovely.
He was to promote their new wax.
He was to promote And lest we forget, that was only 2 years removed from them changing their name. I don't know why they would have changed it from the Basingstoke Beavers, but they were the Basingstoke Beavers.
And then they became the Basingstoke Bisons.
And then realised
there's no plural of bison.
Yeah.
Fact.
But they do seem to be, and again, that's not a disrespect. I know when they joined the Elite League, they were kept and propped up because their proximity to London. I don't know whether the Superleague was as a similar thing, or
I just think they had backing, as Franny said. I can't remember who their owners are for the life of me, but they had Peter Woods, who was the British coach, I think, at the time,
and their arena, like when it was at full capacity, was just over 3,000. So it was actually bigger than Cardiff's was.
Well, because they held the Norwich Union Cup there that one year, and they had some good players. Was it Richard Galache in goal? He was a good player, and mentioned Richard Little and Merv Priest, and Kevin Conway was still there, and you forgot what a good player he was, and I miss Basingstoke. I miss Basingstoke and Bracknell. I'd love to have those two, particularly Bracknell, because that is a 3,000 plus arena with a good ice pad. I'd love to see them back in the top level.
The Knight family are back in charge of Bracknell.
Oh, are they?
As well. I believe it's the grandchildren have taken it on.
See, that would be a good one close to London, and a nice derby for Guildford.
They have made some. They put some investment into the rink recently, I believe, as well, and maybe there's a little inkling.
The only thing I always didn't like about Bracknell Rink, first of all, from a player's point of view, the changing rooms are oh my god, it is like a shoebox. Yeah, it's absolutely tiny. So you had to have half your team changing in skate hire.
Okay, right.
So that's as a player.
Yeah.
When I've gone down there to watch games, it must be downstairs, and the plexiglass,
because you've got the high balcony, haven't you, and then you're sort of enclosed down below.
And you're enclosed, and and it sort of captures all the noise and the atmosphere and stuff like that. That's a really weird design for an ice rink, but
it's good ice, isn't it? It's a big ice pad, and
it's a big ice pad.
Yeah, very good history of bringing through some damn fine players as well. Looking at Danny Myers,
Sam Duggan,
Mark Richardson.
Yeah,
it's not a bad legacy.
They put up with Todd Kelman for a while. And, sorry, Todd, Super League winner there, very good defenseman.
So that was the 8 founding teams, and the British Ice Hockey Association now don't have any jurisdiction over anything.
I think Super League formed that. The late David Temmie, I think, was heavily involved as well. So I think this was a separate entity in its own right. So I remember Sky covered the 95-96 Wembley, and it was the first Wembley that wasn't on the BBC, and I think it was a pretty good Wembley. I think Sheffield beat Nottingham on penalty shots, and I think Sky thought, we'll have a little bit of this. So I think kind of with that TV deal and with driving forces like Sir John Hall and the late David Temmie, this was a separate entity in its own right. And as I said, hindsight's a wonderful thing, but at the time it was very, very exciting.
And I think I talked before, didn't I, about it was when we talked about Glenn Anderson and the potential deal that was on the table for him. The business plan in Cardiff was to knowingly lose something like £500,000 for 3 years in a row, and then have the new arena have the TV money that was going to be millions and millions. Mm-hmm. So that £1.5 million losses over 3 years would just be wiped out by this windfall.
Yeah.
And as we know now, never happened.
The other thing, just to throw in before we start talking about the season in general, I think even though it was a football-related thing, for sort of the 18 months beforehand, the Bosman rule had really kicked in all sports, and there was this freedom of movement of players in Europe. So it wasn't that we moved from 3 imports and all Brits to the Super League. There was kind of creeping up before that there were players with European passports who,
and that was Newcastle again.
That was Newcastle.
They were the first ones to sort of test the water and say, right, we're just going to bring these.
We're going to bring these guys in.
Finns over, didn't they?
And we did it with Robert Millet the season before Super League.
Unfortunately.
Unfortunately, someone like I think Simon Keating lost his job, and I know Geeks listens to this. Simon Keating lost his job, and we brought in Robert Millet because I think he had an Italian passport. So it wasn't that Super League.
I think you'll find that's a French passport with a name like Millet.
Is it French? I thought it was Italian. No, it's French.
Okay. See what Elite Prospect says. You carry on, John.
I'll get back to you. I don't get, but thanks for correcting me, Franny. But yeah, I think the league wasn't all. You didn't just jump 100 miles an hour from this. We've got great British development program to we're now only giving imports jobs. That was unfortunately a byproduct of Super League, but it had sort of crept in before that, and Cardiff had done it themselves with the French Robert Millet.
As backed up by Elite Prospects.
Thanks.
Franny, as a player, how are you feeling about this influx of foreign talent? Are you concerned or are you excited about prospects of yourself as a player? Because at this point, Manny, you're pretty well established in Devils colours, and you're.
Yeah, I do think this is the year that actually it was the year before that the concerns started coming in when Newcastle, when they were in the Sunderland rink, started bringing these extra guys in. I do remember that first game against Newcastle when they signed these extra players, and I remember skating the width of our ice just to absolutely crush one of their guys just because he was European. I remember it like one of the hardest hits I've ever thrown.
So you were like 20 years ahead of your time in terms of Brexit. You were just
no, he was nearly Brexit. But I remember seeing like my eyes light up when one of these Finns got the puck, and I just literally came from one wing to the other, and I mean charging didn't even come into it. It was way beyond that. But so that was, I was definitely obviously feeling threatened by that. And then when you go on to this season, and I'm sure we get to talk about it. Well, we did talk about it in one of the previous episodes. The Brest training camp, and we had all the guys trying out, and you get the likes of Beavis and One Punch and all that.
While we're talking about him, actually, Shannon's in the country at the moment. We did try to get him on, but he's busy. Would he know who One Punch was if we text him?
No chance. No chance. No.
Well, the mystery continues.
Yeah. There's only one person I think that might know who One Punch was. 2 people. And I asked one, I didn't get a reply. That's Paul Heavey. The other one, maybe Andy French.
Yeah, Andy French. He's an organised guy. Andy French would know.
Yeah, okay. Andy, if you're listening,
I don't know if I want to know.
No.
Okay.
No.
Well,
some mysteries are better left unsolved.
Maybe we'll get, if he does know, he can write it down and we'll put it in a box. We'll
bury
decide,
it. Never ever do that.
But then, maybe one day it'll be there for future generations. We'll find this podcast floating in space somewhere to find out. Sorry, I interrupted you there.
Not at all.
Franny.
What was I talking about?
All the guys coming into training camp.
Guys coming into training camp in Brest. So then, I think we were sort of unaware of it coming into the summer, because you kind of get quite assumptive that you've had a decent year the year before, so you get a new contract, and the thing we're hoping for, Super League coming on, that means a chance for more money, and then when the Sky money comes in, we're going to be zillionaires. But then, flying over to Brest, and ahead of that, I picked up Vez from the airport, as we talked about. We get into Brest, there's another 3 or 4 guys, and again, I'm going to sound like such a bully. I remember those training camps, and I've probably mentioned it before, treating those guys, the German guys out there, I made some pretty bad hits on them. I remember hitting Beavis into the goal frame, and we do a cross-ice scrimmage, so you bring the nets cross-ice, which means there's no room to skate behind the net like there would be if you're on full ice. And he was there trying to dig the puck out, so I just smashed him into the goal frame. Almost like a statement, you're not taking my job. So there definitely was this threat there, because you know, we were starting running around in practice at anyone that, you know, looked like they could be a threat to us.
Well, based on what today's classification of an import would be, it rose from 9 imports the season before the Super League to 18 for this inaugural season from the Devils roster.
Yeah.
Other teams may have had more because we were quite lucky in Cardiff in the sense that there was still Stevie Lyle, yourself, Franny, James Manson, Jason Stone. So
and Ian Cooper. This was the first year, just as a footnote, this was the first year that the Coopers separated, which was...
That would have been so weird for them, and I know it was when they...
And I think that one of the first games of the league season was Manchester, perhaps in not the league season, maybe a B&H Cup, and I remember at the time Stephen and Ian talking about how weird it was playing against each other.
The second Autumn Cup game of the year, the 1st of September.
And weird for their parents who'd always travelled everywhere to watch them together, and all of a sudden to watch them against each other.
Another British name on the roster, Peter Smith.
Waffles, I think, listens in too.
Yeah.
He had 33 appearances in this season.
It was his last. I remember, and I know we're jumping ahead. And spoiler alert: the Devils won the league that year. There's a great.
We can cut that out.
We can cut that there. But that was his first. Was it his first major trophy or was his first league trophy? I remember that was a big thing for him. And he got the cover of Iceland Newsroom, and there's a great picture with his white BT hat on and holding up the Monteith Bowl, and I think Peter Smith deserved that.
So, you know, in terms of British talent, you know, the Devils compared to other teams that year were pretty blessed. And
we didn't say anything about talent. We just said we had British guys. Ian Cooper and Stevie Lyle aside.
Did you score a nice goal at Sheffield that year in a 4-4 draw?
Against Pierre Greco.
Yeah, you scored a nice goal in a 4. Ken Hodge scored a couple, and you scored one.
Don't remember Ken Hodge's goals.
Ken Hodge scored a couple, you scored one. I don't know who scored the other. But
talk us through it.
I just remember it was like a good shot. It was like, it wasn't just like a tip in or something. It was like an actual shot, like sort of glove side shelf, that kind of. I could say whatever I like. It's on YouTube. So coast to coast, through the legs of a D-man. I think I got I was sort of parked in the slot, get a shot away and beat Greco, who's like actually a decent goalie.
Oh, is he netmining coach of the island? He's netmining coach somewhere in the NHL. So
there we are, and he still scars him to this day.
He does, yeah. And he always tells his guys to look out for that shot from the slot. But another little known fact that I am going to pump my own tyres with, I scored the second ever Super League goal.
Really?
Wow.
Second ever amongst the whole league. The very first Super League game, so forget about Autumn Trophy or whatever it was, so the first ever Super League game, we had an early face-off for some reason. I don't know if they were televising it or something, but we had the trophy there. Yeah. They were making it all a more professional era. But we had an earlier face-off than the rest of the league. I think we were chosen because probably Dave Temmie was a key figure in setting up the Super League. And Cardiff was Dave Temmie's club. No bias there. But we played against Bracknell in Bracknell, and the first ever goal in the Super League was scored by Ian Cooper.
Wow.
And I scored the second. Two British guys.
That's great.
In a 5-4 victory on the 21st of September 1996.
Because this is, and we'll go into.
And I actually, I very rarely remember anything about games I've played in. It's like, honestly, it's ridiculous how much I've forgotten. But I remember that I did score the go-ahead goal, and then they tied the game, and I was pissed off because I thought I'm going to get the game winner in the first ever Super League.
I'm not sure if it was this one or one later in the season, maybe a 3-1 at Bracknell. I remember Doug McCarthy missed the worst open net I've ever seen in my life. Really, really bad open net.
And I think my goal might have been against Mark Bernard as well. I'm not 100% sure on that.
Who have they been? Bernard and Brian Greer maybe were their netminders?
I remember that it was like the goal. There was a bit of a scramble, and the puck. There was a shot on net, and the goalie came flying out, and I somehow managed to almost like chip him over. But second ever Super League goal.
Yeah, Mark Bernard now a high
Chicago,
figure in the Chicago. So the moral of this story is everyone that Franny has scored against,
they go on to bigger and better things.
They make the show. If Franny scores great, you make the show. But I think just on that point that winning away from home, and I'm sure we'll touch on this, guys. But for the first month of the season, it was our away form that kept us in it, because I remember we were awful at home. So much so, I think we lost 3 or 4 home games maybe in a row in the league. And I remember there was a gentleman up at the back of Block 13. I think we lost a home game maybe against Bracknell. And he took his shirt off and threw it on the ice.
No, that was, what they used to call him? Block 13?
It was the guy at the back, the guy with the moustache.
Tonsils. It was Tonsils.
I didn't know he was called Tonsils.
Yeah, that was the fear.
Okay, but he threw his shirt on the ice. Yeah.
Yeah, and I wonder if back then people used to say this is the worst Devils team I've ever seen before we then go and win the league.
But they had to write it down on paper.
Yeah, and mail it into.
Yeah.
But yeah, you are right about the home form there. John's
of course he is.
Loss
after
Franny's second ever goal in Super League history. The next night is a 7-6 loss at home against the Nottingham Panthers. And then there's an Autumn Cup loss against the Panthers
shootout
a week later. And then a loss to the Manchester Storm in the middle of October. And then is a loss against Basingstoke Bison. So the first 4 home league games.
It's all falling apart, isn't it?
It's all falling apart. There was a lot of pressure on Paul Heavey.
So the other thing that I remember about this season from having a look on Elite Prospects earlier today was
we'll edit that out.
That we lost Randy Smith early in the season.
Yes.
No, joke aside, I do remember this because he had a really bad neck injury. I think he played a few Autumn Cup games, got a bad neck injury, and ended up having to have like neck surgery with a disc removed and a little cage put in. So we lost him for the year.
Yeah.
And did we then get Marty Uchuk?
No, Hodge was Uchuk.
No, Hodge was already with us, I think.
No, Hodge came in. Hodge was Smith's replacement because Hodge and Smith were friends, and Smith recommended Hodge. Uchuk came in a little late, but because Frank Evans came in late that year, the season already started, and Frank Evans came in. I think Uchuk came in a little late, and obviously played on that great line with Sacratini and McCarthy, which was meant to be the third line, but I think both Sacratini and McCarthy finished in the top 3 scorers. Yeah. With Dale Junkin, I think, of Bracknell. So yeah, but we were still kind of. I'm not sure with Paul Heavey whether he knew, because I remember John Lawless telling me the story that he was told there was going to be an import cap, and so he signed lots of reclassified players, guys like Jeff Lindsay and things like that. He didn't realise the Super League would be of such a high standard, and I remember doing an interview with John Lawrence, and he kind of said that's what cost him his job. He got the reclassified guys early because he thought they would be of a higher value, and it turns out he didn't actually have the standard of team he needed. I think Paul Heavey might have gone the other way and sort of waited to see what was happening in the first few games. I remember we brought in Frank Evans a little late, Marty Uchuk after he played roller hockey with Doug McCarthy in the summer. So, you know, I think Paul Heavey was a little bit clever there. But he was, when we were losing those home games, I'm probably not from management, but I remember amongst the fans, Paul Heavey was under a little bit of pressure.
That roller hockey...
RHI, Roller Hockey International.
Yes.
Didn't Ian McIntyre come from?
Ian McIntyre, the next summer, but he'd played there as well. Yeah,
I think it was like, you know, for hockey players that are getting paid 8 or 9 months of the year, that was like their windfall, wasn't it? So in the summer they'd go across and they were making decent money. They were trying to make a big push on this roller hockey, and I
guess it's like going to Australia now. Some of the guys go down under in the summer just to make sure they get paid 12 months of the year.
Just don't look at the Manchester roster after what you said about the reclassification.
Guys like John Finney and Jeff Lindsay, Hilton Ruggles. Was Nick Poole still around, maybe? And
Dino Barber. Ended up in a variety of Scottish teams.
He did. Mike Morin,
assistant coach. Yeah, he's still assistant coach at Manchester, isn't he?
Yeah. So
they brought in Sean Byron, who I always liked Sean Byron.
Yeah, he's a tough boy as well.
And a guy called Bart. Can't beat that. I don't think I've ever known of
Eric Van Bart, is it?
No.
They had a guy called Brad Turner. Is Brad Turner on this? Who was in Hollywood. He used to do, if there was ever a hockey movie, he'd be like one of the main stunt guys. So I think he was known as Hollywood.
Was it Brad Zavisha as well? We're making that up.
Stefan Catola didn't come that year. He came later. But they signed a French-Canadian goalie halfway through the year, Eric Merland or something, and
Eric Raymond.
There we go. Shows I haven't done my research. But I think I remember John Lawless telling me in an interview I did for the 30th anniversary, he was given a heads up that there was going to be an import restriction. So he thought he was being really clever, and he was. He went and got lots of reclassified imports who would fall into the British category, and then it appeared that there was a change and there was no import restriction, and Lawless was left with these guys who were good players. I always liked someone like Jeff Lindsay, but in terms of then the players that were being brought in, maybe not quite up to the same standard.
And I've just checked it out, and there was a Brad Zawisza, and what I remember about him is he was a first-round draft pick.
Really?
He was. I think he was one of those kind of quite renowned busts.
Okay.
Like, who's the guy that played?
Scott Kalman
in Coventry as well.
Kalman
So
in
Brad
Coventry,
Zawisza
yeah.
was one of those guys that apparently got drafted in first round, and then scouts lost their jobs.
Who was the guy we had that you got that the season after we went into liquidation, and you and G did a great job putting the roster together from Ottawa?
First round draft?
Yeah, I don't think he was first round, but he was reasonably high. And I remember you and G say, because he'd taken a couple of years off hockey, and the year we got to the playoff final against Nottingham and lost.
Scott Dobben?
Scott Dobben.
Third round pick.
Yeah. Okay.
Scott Dobben.
Not that inspiring of a player. Lovely guy. Yeah, me and G still do talk about, like, what do we think he was trying to achieve, going down on his off wing and just floating one into the goalie's pads. Every single shot. But anyway.
Well, I'm glad I brought him up.
Yeah. Sorry, and I do genuinely like him as a guy as well.
Yeah.
Very nice guy, and he messaged us when we signed Chris Whitley,
Yeah.
and when we were struggling
Yeah.
for a goalie, and he said, "Oh, look, I think I've got a goalie for you." So thanks for that, and
Yeah.
apologies for
Apologies.
carving you on your play. But
Yeah.
we just every single time we were like, "Oh, you got to check." No, he's just going to chip it on the goalie's pads, and okay, here's a whistle. Yeah.
Force the face off, Scott.
Never know what's going to crop up. First Superleague year, and Scott Dobbins ended up.
and he had earpieces as well on his helmets. On those CCM helmets, like really, it just looks funny, and we could never get over that. Could never get past that.
That's why you didn't get the second year.
Yeah, the earpieces. Promotion relegation's gone. As a fan, did you miss that? Was that a worry there's going to be none of variation and not enough going on? Because everyone qualified for the playoffs, I believe.
Yeah, it was weird. Again, having always grown up with the British style mentality in football of promotion relegation, and having had that in ice hockey, it was a bit strange to go to this franchise style hockey. And we talked about in the previous episode how at one point Sheffield sold half their franchise to Leeds, and again 20 odd years later Leeds play their first game.
Not quite yet, because the ring's not ready. It's something to do with that ring, isn't it? Yeah.
But congratulations to the Leeds Chiefs on their first game.
Good luck to Sami Zajac.
Good, yeah, always liked him. Always
Loved
liked him as a
Sami
player.
Zajac.
Yeah.
Top bloke.
But it was a bit of a culture shock. But again, you were just caught up on this kind of crest of a wave because the publicity was good. They had the big launch in London. I think they went to Trafalgar Square, didn't they? And Shannon was on the roller skates with a few of them, and there was a whole big media presence around it, and Sky had picked it up. So it was a bit of a shock, and I grew up with football, so I always like the promotion relegation. I think it keeps it interesting right till the end of the season. But you got caught up in the the atmosphere of Super League and what it could be, and it was just nice that Cardiff was classed as one of the top 8 clubs in the country that should be there, and everything was based around this new arena, which was this was before the Sports Village. We just knew it was going to be somewhere on Ferry Road, and this was when Ferry Road was, I think, still a kind of a waste dump. And then you got the Asdas down there and the IKEA, and eventually, after about 20 years later, they put up the big blue tent.
Worth the wait. Franny, as a player, I suppose it didn't make much difference to you because, from a Cardiff perspective, you were always going to be aiming for the top, regardless. So there was never any worry that there was going to be nothing games towards the end of the year in 7th, 8th place.
Yeah, I mean the whole promotion relegation thing is weird in hockey just because of I think in the import rules, isn't it? You've got to be a really bad team to get relegated. I mean, if you're a top flight team and you've got 10 imports or whatever, and then you're playing off against the league below that's got 4, and you've got to be really bad to go down. And generally, it didn't happen, did it? I mean, obviously there was exceptions with us, but I think I remember when Durham finished. Right,
yeah, they did. They did.
In Slough
they had to play Romford.
Romford, there we go. But you know, that it's just such a mismatch that. Yeah, the stabilisation. This is where the sort of clubs took control of their own destiny, didn't they? Like you said before, Gaza, there was no sort of governing body over them. It was the same structure we got today, where you've got clubs around the table and they sort of have a democracy on the way the sport goes.
I think the sad thing for me, and I say again, I was very excited about this progress, but bearing in mind the Devils had already been in existence for 10 years, but you lost some teams that have been sort of intertwined with the Devils and the fabric of the Devils' history. You lost Slough. Slough for years had been trying to get in the Premier League, as it were. They had a season in the Premier League the year before Superleague. I think didn't go particularly successfly, but then all of a sudden they were out anyway. Teams like Telford weren't going to go into Super League. Swindon, who then became the Ice Lords and won a lot of trophies before running into financial trouble. But that was the sad part for me, particularly as a lot of these teams were M4 corridor teams as well. It was always nice going to Slough and going to Swindon. So it was sad to see some of these traditional rivals being lost. But I guess if you were one of the ins instead of one of the outs, maybe you didn't care that much. But looking back, it was sorry that you didn't get to go to lovely, luxurious places like the Hangar in Slough. I do miss that.
They were in Swindon and Slough were in the Devils Autumn Cup group in that season.
Great kebab shop in Slough. The first ever chicken doner I had.
Really?
In Slough, yeah. Always worth a trip.
It wasn't the one in the league I called Jason Donovan when I passed the last time I went to Slough.
Basingstoke had the Donovan. They had the Donovan, and Slough had the actual kebab shop with the chicken doner, which was unheard of.
Suddenly got a business idea.
There you go.
Was it a 2-horse race from the start, Sheffield Cardiff, or was there any kind of thought that another team were going to make a run on this?
I don't think it was initially because of Cardiff's poor home form. As I said, I think Sheffield seemingly remember it. They were the league champions. And they'd signed some stellar players. But players I remember with big resumes who didn't necessarily work out. We talked about Jamie Leach before, a lovely guy. He came in with a big resume and reputation because of his dad and doesn't really deliver. Corey Bolio came in and he was going to be this biggest, toughest boy in the league, and that never quite materialised. But Sheffield was still going to be the team to beat. I think Bracknell had a decent start to the season, but if memory serves, Ayr with a surprise package, possibly finished third that year. They did well. Angelo Catanero, who we've talked about before, and Sven Ramp was in goal for them, and Sven Ramp before Rob Dobson came in. Sven Ramp was in. So, but I think from kind of October onwards, and certainly around the time that you had the transition between Stefan Zeesch and Steve Thornton in early December. By that time it had kind of shaken down to a 2-horse race between the Steelers and the Devils.
I tell you who my 2 favourite players in the league that year were, and who I felt the most dangerous opponents were Askew and Dobben in Newcastle.
Askew was fast, wasn't he?
Yeah, Askew was super fast and Dobben was really clever. And Doberman's now an agent, like quite a high level agent, and
Scott Dobbin's agent, or
not that high, but I actually one year we were looking for players, and I was trying to get some sort of fresh angles into maybe into a pool that we hadn't tapped before, and I looked at there's like a NHL database of agents, and I saw Doberman on there. So I emailed him and I said, you won't remember me. I used to sit on the bench while you and Askew teared up the Super League. And he came back and goes, that's brought back some good memories. So that was quite a funny moment. But yeah, just those 2 guys, they were absolutely deadly, and it just always gave.
Yeah, I remember Kelly Askew was Grease Lightning.
Yeah, really good. I think he might have had a bad injury, like a concussion or something. Yeah. But yeah, he's super, super fast, and Dobben was deadly. So. That was probably the deadliest combination I felt in the league that year.
While we're talking about Newcastle, can I just bring up one of my favourite stories? There was one of the games in Cardiff that year where the equipment manager forgot to pack their tops, and Gaz,
the Adidas tops.
The Adidas tops.
I think it was a game live on Sky.
It might possibly
I
could have
think
been.
that's why I
right.
remember it. I was
Yeah.
watching it.
So they had to go into the fans, didn't they, and ask to borrow some of their tops.
Yeah.
And I remember reading in
And
Power
then
Play
they-
something,
then
one
they
of them
taped-
smelled of perfume.
They
and
taped on numbers
They
and
taped
stick
on
tape,
numbers.
because obviously all the replicas
Yeah.
back then didn't have your name badge
No.
and numbers, so they had the blank sort of
Yeah.
backs on them, and they had black stick tape
That
in a
was
Sky
on
game.
Sky.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Justin Doberman had in that first league year 106 penalty minutes in 30 games.
Wow.
That's
He had some tough boys in the league. Up at Air again, you had Scott Young, who I always liked, but had a bit of a screw loose, and you had Ryan Kumu and obviously Mikey Ware in Cardiff. The other guy I remember coming into the league, he was a veteran, but I remember watching him in the Olympics, so this was a sign for me that, this is another level. And again, up in Air, there was a guy called Yuri Lala, who was a Czech international, who came in. And you think, oh God, I've seen this guy playing in international competition.
He's getting on a bit, wasn't he?
He was about 38, 39,
yeah,
but he was still
like,
yeah.
it was legit, yeah.
and luckily for him, playing just shy of a few years before the Teletubbies became popular.
Indeed.
Or else opposition fans might have had a bit more of a time with him.
And I do believe he's got a son, Yuri Lala Jr., who
Does he?
plays now, yeah.
Oh, well,
I think.
that's good knowledge.
And he's good knowledge.
I told you I live on Elite Prospects.
Robin Milay's nationality and Yuri Lala's son.